So today I just wanted to make a quick video discussing hallucinations and archetypal symbolism. Archetypal symbolism is basically the language that the subconscious mind uses to communicate. You can see this in dreams. Dreams are highly symbolic, and these symbols can be interpreted as a way to see what is in your subconscious mind and see what your subconscious mind is trying to communicate to you. The subconscious mind communicates through symbolism in dreams, and it also communicates through symbolism in hallucinations and delusions. So I wanted to share a few examples of my experiences recently, just to illustrate how this happens and how it can be useful to try and interpret psychosis as the subconscious mind communicating. I personally find it useful to try and see what my subconscious mind is communicating with me, because this is a way to move more towards integrating experiences and more towards a sense of wholeness and a sense of connection with the subconscious. And real fast, if you want a good resource to look into this topic more, I really recommend this book, The Inner World of Trauma, Archetypal Defenses of the Personal Spirit by Donald Kalsched. Okay, so just to jump right into it. The first example I want to share. One evening I saw a waterfall of water droplets coming through my ceiling. So I thought that there was a hole in my roof. I thought my roof was just leaking really badly in this one spot. And I stuck my hand out to feel the water droplets coming down in a waterfall. And I couldn't feel anything. And at that point, I looked up to the ceiling to try to see if it was there where it was coming from. And just like that, the water disappeared. So I realized at that point that it was actually a hallucination, that it wasn't actually there. And I found this interesting because in terms of archetypal symbolism, water represents the subconscious. You'll often see this with symbolism of the ocean. I found it interesting that I saw this waterfall of water coming from the ceiling when I was in this psychotic state, because essentially what was happening was that I was dealing with a lot of stress, and I had gone into this altered state where I was a lot more connected to my subconscious mind. And this basically symbolically represented that I was being flooded with my subconscious. And then in this way, this symbolized me being flooded by my subconscious, this water falling down. Also, when I'm in a psychotic state, I tend to think of it more as me being underground in a way. The outside regular grounded dimension that I'm normally in, when I'm in the psychotic dimension, it feels kind of like I'm pulled under and underground. And you'll see underground used as a symbol for the subconscious too, a lot of the time. So it's also interesting that the water was coming from above me, falling down, as if I was sort of underneath. And this hallucination, it wasn't scary at all. It was more just kind of interesting to me. I used to get really scared by my hallucinations when I would realize that I was hallucinating, because I had an internalized stigma against myself for what it meant that I was hallucinating. I thought that it meant that I was losing my mind or just not sane. So thankfully I've worked past that internalized stigma, and now I see hallucinations as just my subconscious communicating with me. And I'm more curious now when it happens. I now just try and interpret what it is sharing with me. And this is a way to move more towards integrating your full experiences and reaching more of a sense of wholeness. So around this same time when I was having this psychotic episode, I also had another hallucination where I saw a woman all dressed in white in this like white flowy clothing, sort of like a shawl dress situation. And I saw her from across the room. She was walking through the kitchen, walking away from me, and went down a hallway, out of sight. I've actually seen this hallucination before, and I had a sense that it was the same symbol. I saw this one before when I was a little kid. And when I see her, I do feel fear for a moment initially, because it's just surprising to see a person inside your house when you're not expecting to see anybody there. But luckily I was able to realize that she was a hallucination pretty quickly, partially just because of how she looked. She was translucent and just completely white all over. I found it interesting that I had the sense that she was the same as the one that I saw in childhood. So I've dealt with CPTSD since childhood, and I also have dissociative identity disorder, so that's basically where your sense of self is fragmented and parts of your sense of self are disconnected. So my symbolic interpretation of this hallucination was that she represents parts of my psyche that are more feminine parts. Carl Jung, the psychologist, he talks a lot about archetypal symbolism in his work, and he also talks about the concept that we have masculine and feminine energy within us. And so with my dissociative identity disorder, I have parts that are separated that are more masculine and parts that are separated that are more feminine. And if you look at them all overall put together, it's a pretty good balance of masculine and feminine. So I think that this hallucination represents some of my more feminine parts that I've actually been working on integrating more lately. I'm learning more to accept these parts of myself, and so I think this was just an external projection, an external symbolic representation of these parts within me. In a way, it was kind of nice seeing her. It was like she's still here with me, even though I used to see her when I was a little kid, and I haven't really felt connected with a lot of the feminine parts of me for a while. It was kind of a reminder that they're still there. This hallucination of this feminine figure allowed me to accept that these feminine parts are parts of my psyche, in that case being projected externally, looking like an external person. It allowed me to come to terms with the fact that those are parts of me, and I don't have to ignore them. I can accept that they're there, and I don't have to be afraid of them. So I like not only interpreting what my psyche is communicating with me, but also trying to use these experiences to integrate more parts of my overall experience. And then I had another hallucination around that same time where I saw a little black animal that kind of looked like a shadow, and it looked sort of like a dog or a cat, something pretty small and fluffy, and also kind of translucent and just completely black, like a dark shadow. And I've hallucinated these sorts of things a lot in the past too, animals, and it's kind of nice because in the past I've hallucinated a lot of really scary things, and I actually kind of enjoy when I see the animals because they're kind of a nice presence. It makes me feel comforted and happy because I like animals. And I kind of think of them as like my little animal helpers, like they appear and bring these good feelings along with them. It's basically a way that my psyche sends these symbols of these little comforting friends to help me cope through difficult times. And yeah, I really want to emphasize that hallucinations aren't always scary. They don't always feel like bad things. In the past, several years ago, I used to have a lot of really scary hallucinations. I would see things that looked like shadow people and zombies, what looked like demons, and just these monstrous, scary things. And a lot of that came from the fact that my own shadow self was very not integrated at that point. I had a lot of stuff within my own psyche that I was trying to ignore and avoid and that I was afraid of and running away from. So this manifested symbolically, externally, as these scary monsters that I was trying to avoid and run away from because I was trying to avoid and run away from parts of myself. And over the years, as I've integrated more parts of myself in my own subconscious, I very rarely have scary hallucinations anymore, actually. So it's nice that that kind of thing can change and progress. And something that has helped in that process has been to be curious about my hallucinations and what they're communicating, instead of being afraid and letting my own self-stigma make me afraid. And on the topic of hallucinations that can be comforting, I also had a hallucination pretty recently where the best I can describe it is that I was hearing fairy music. Like, that was the first thought that came to my mind when I heard it. I heard this music and I just thought, where is that fairy music coming from? I was trying to figure out where the music was coming from. I couldn't tell it was a hallucination at first, so I was picking up my phone, trying to see if there was some music playing from somewhere on there. I was with a roommate at that point before I moved, so I asked them, do you hear that fairy music? Like, where is it coming from? And they just laughed and said that they couldn't hear anything, and they're aware that I hallucinate, so then we both knew that I was hallucinating. We kind of laughed it off. And that was also when I was going through a pretty stressful time. That was before I moved, so it was just a lot of upheaval. And I kind of saw this as my psyche offering me something nice and comforting because I really like music. So it was just giving me some music to listen to kind of calm me down and make me feel better. And I find it interesting too that my first thought was to categorize it as fairy music. Because if you think about fairy tales, this sort of concept of fairy tales and fantasy fairies, that is all very much to do with the subconscious and subconscious symbolism. We as humans have used fairy tales for centuries to communicate about topics to do with the subconscious. A lot of fairy tales involve a lot of archetypal symbolism, you know, like the hero's journey and stuff like that. And so fairies and fairy tales, that concept, it is all very heavily intertwined with the subconscious. So it's just kind of interesting that that was my first thought, that it was music coming from fairies, because it was music coming from my subconscious, that subconscious dimension. And one more hallucination that I had in this place that I am now, several years ago when I was staying here, I saw a ladder going from the floor all the way up to the ceiling in the living room. And that's another really interesting archetypal symbol, ladders. Ladders sort of represent spiritual growth, spiritual improvement, that sense of climbing upwards. And that's an opportunity that I think curiosity can provide if you allow yourself to be curious about your internal experiences and what your subconscious is communicating with you. This allows that sort of spiritual growth and movement towards wholeness. So that was another nice symbol to see, that symbol of a ladder. I've seen ladders a lot in dreams. If something scary is happening in the dream, sometimes there will just be a ladder and I'm able to climb it and get out of there to somewhere safer. So that's another comforting symbol that has recurred for me. So I thought that was nice, actually, seeing that ladder going up to the ceiling. It was kind of like communicating to me that I can climb and grow and reach a sense of more safety. So yeah, I just wanted to share a little bit about how hallucinations relate with symbolism and how the subconscious can use symbolism through hallucinations as well as through dreams to communicate to you. And it can be beneficial to be curious about what the symbolism means and what's being communicated. This has really allowed me to be less afraid of my hallucinations and psychosis, opening up to curiosity instead of fear. And I think it's helped me grow and integrate more of myself and my experiences. So just wanted to share a little bit about that today. If anybody has any similar experiences, anybody that can relate, I would love to hear about it in the comments. Or any other thoughts about this topic or symbolism in general. I would love to hear about it, so feel free to comment below. And I hope everybody is well. Hope everyone's taking care of themselves, and thank you very much for watching.